Hey guys, Booligan here with Booligan Shooting Sports, and today we're going to be talking about a somewhat forgotten company from the 1980s and 90s, Intratec. Intratec is most widely known for the Tech 9 and AB10 and all of those other spin-offs of it, but the Tech 9 series of pistols. Those were 9mm blowback, kind of little ghetto blaster pistols. They are relatively terrible, but can be a lot of fun. And we have really fun 3D printed receivers for them so that you can use like Glock magazines to increase their reliability. But that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is their 22 that they put out. It initially was called the Tech 22. They make the Tech 9. It makes sense that they make the Tech 22 as well. Those ran up until the assault weapons ban of 1994, and then they had to make a couple of changes into the Sport-22, which is what this is. Now, this is slightly modified. I've made some cosmetic changes to it because I'm me and I can't not make cosmetic changes to everything that I own. But let's go ahead and let's give this a little tour, talk about how it works, and talk about what I did to it to make it a little bit more me. These were polymer framed handguns. They are relatively lightweight. They are compatible with Ruger 1022 magazines. This particular one is fitted with a modern Ruger BX25 magazine. They're pretty much entirely ambidextrous, and mainly that's because they have very, very simplistic controls. Your magazine release is this little guy underneath. The frame, or the receiver, that the magazine locks into, it's a little loose. They're like almost all, like all 1022s, there needs to be a space for this little nub in the front of the magazine to rest in. And sometimes they don't nest in as well as you'd like, and they can do that, and then you don't feed properly. That is a common issue with these, and you really don't want to be holding it by the magazine because the likelihood of you pulling that out of alignment and causing the rounds to just nosedive into the feed ramp are high, very high, which is one reason why I added a handguard, which we'll talk about in a second. But they're polymer framed, they're lightweight. You have the magazine release, you have an ambidextrous slider style safety, and you have ambidextrous charging handles, which kind of just do that with. It's actually kind of a slick design. It's pretty similar, at least cosmetically, to what's on like the SITES Spectre. And that was my inspiration when I was designing this handguard. I kind of wanted to make the 22 caliber SITES Spectre at home. And I think I hit that mark pretty close. They have a hinged top cover. The top cover is made out of metal, has your sights on it, and it's easily accessed by pushing this little button at the rear and opening it up. Once it's opened up, you can see the very, very simple fire control group, the very simple blowback operated bolt. This is a 22. It doesn't need to have a complex or really any sort of delay mechanism in it. You can disassemble it further by kind of pulling everything out. There's your bolt. There is your fire control group, and it's super, super, super simple. The bolt is just a chunk of metal with a screwed on charging handle, has enough mass, it works fine, does its purpose. The fire control group is extremely simplistic in that it doesn't even really have a disconnector. So pull the trigger, it just drops the hammer. When it goes back, get it in frame, when it goes back, you are forcing it over the sear. And that sear, a disconnector is part of the sear process. Because of that, these tend to have a little bit of trigger slap, which not too much because it's a blowback operated 22. You're not going to get a ton. It's not like something like a Mac, which uses the same trigger system, but delivers just a ton of trigger slap into your finger. These are fine. They're not terribly crazy comfortable, but they're fine. You learn where that balance point is, and you can bump fire these quite easily. Inside, with that hammer back down, you're going to see one of the big problems with this, and that's the ejector right there. So these have an extractor. A little claw there extracts the spent casing out of the barrel when you shoot it, but then something has to kick it off the bolt. In most guns, you're going to have some sort of metal ejector. It's either going to be machined into the trigger assembly, into the receiver. There's going to be some good solid ejector here. On this, you've got a plastic ejector that just, it sits in, it's part of the fire control group housing or part of the frame. And unfortunately, those are failure prone, because wouldn't you know that something that is designed to sit there and take the impact of rounds hitting it frequently probably should be made out of a more durable material than injection molded plastic. But I'm not the fine folks over at Intratec, so that's not my choice. Fun fact about Intratec, my understanding, they went on to become Keltec. And once you realize that, it makes a lot of sense. So the differences between the Sport-22 and the Tech-22, primarily two things. One, the Tech-22 had a threaded barrel. It was not threaded in the standard 1/2 by 28. I believe it was 1/2 by 20 TPI, but don't necessarily quote me on that. But it was threaded. It had a little knurled thread protector there on the end. Well, with the 1994 assault weapons ban, you couldn't have threaded barrels on pistols. They became assault pistols. The assault weapon ban of 1994 made a lot of things illegal. So they changed it to no longer have a threaded barrel, but it still looks like it does. It still has knurling on the end, but it's just cut into the barrel. It's not a cover or anything like that. They also changed the magazine that they came with. Instead of coming with like a 15 or 20 round magazine, it came with pretty much a standard Ruger 1022 10 round rotary magazine that just kind of plugged in place. But those aren't as fun as the long boys, so we like the long boy. Ergonomics on it are really kind of non-existent. I mean, it fits your hand okay. It's got a lot of very square angles to it, and that's kind of why I love it. As everybody knows, I like 90s guns. I like guns that look like they're from the 80s or 90s. I like squares, 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 squares. I love it. I love that boxy look. So I wanted to roll with that and add a barrel shroud / handguard. And I designed it within an hour of getting the gun. I got this gun locally from a local seller on Utah Gun Exchange. And the thing is basically a perfect time capsule. It came with the original sales receipt and the original layaway paperwork when this thing was originally purchased. It came with the original Intratec little catalog papers showing what their product line is. The original case, the original spent cartridge that they tested it with. The whole package is very cool. So that's why I wanted to customize it a little bit, but without butchering the thing, because it is kind of a cool time capsule. So I designed this handguard / muzzle brake / barrel shroud. And it's very simple. It just fits the same line. It fits the same design language. So there's these reinforcing ribs on top. It has those same reinforcing ribs on top. It has the angled front end. The whole thing is very reminiscent of the SITES Spectre. As I said, I wanted this to sort of be inspired by that. It does have these through vents that allow cooling of the barrel and cooling of the printed part, obviously. PLA plus in close proximity to a barrel of a gun, if it's sitting there and building up heat and not letting any of that heat out, that's going to be potentially problematic. I built in a little muzzle brake here at the front. This is 22 long rifle. There aren't exactly a ton of gases to handle there. It really won't change anything, but it looks really cool, in my opinion, and it shouldn't affect the reliability of this or durability of this part at all. How this is installed is it slides over the barrel and then locks in place over the receiver. There's a little rib on the receiver, and it locks into a nice little spot there on this handguard, and that keeps it from rotating. it's a very tight press fit. I mean, it really needed to be like tapped on gently with a rubber mallet. So it's not coming off anytime soon. But as extra security, there's a little tiny ring at the base of this barrel that's machined in. So it gives it a little bit of a divot, if you will. So I added a screw. It's an M3 screw with the accompanying nut on the other side that kind of slots into that groove to just keep it really from going forwards and backwards at all. There's another one up front that locks into the threads on that little fake, or not the threads, excuse me, the knurling on that little fake thing up front that looks like a threaded barrel but isn't, just to hold it in place extra without causing anything, any sort of permanent damage or really cosmetic issues with the original parts. So I got this because I found it and I liked it. That's pretty much it. I think these are kind of a cool little historical piece, especially this one that was like the full package that it came with originally. It even came with a couple of the original magazines from the time. I love the looks of them. I love the retro futurist, the cyberpunk, the 1980s idea of what the 2000s would look like. I love that look. I think it's super cool. I love rimfire guns. I have so many 22s, especially from this time period, just because I love them. And this one was just kind of a prime example, and I wanted to have it so that I could customize it, so that I could tell you guys a little bit about the interesting history of these things and how they work, and so that we could get it out to the range and shoot it. So many thanks to you guys for watching these videos, because without you guys watching them, I wouldn't have the drive or the means to buy silly, dumb things like this. And of course, this little handguard barrel shroud guy here will be released on all of my normal platforms that I release all of my files at, once we make sure that it doesn't fail catastrophically in any way. So yeah, of course, as always, thanks for watching.